the second section of Russell's essay, Why I Am Not a Christian, he addresses what's called the natural law argument and a couple of different versions of it. What he does is essentially denies natural law and reduces science to chance, which is an interesting move, because the fact is that regularity in chance depends on laws and regularity at tiny levels. The fact is that there is still regularity that can be described in terms of mathematics. Here's a quote from a theoretical particle physicist named Stephen Barr. This comes from his book on about modern physics and ancient faith. You know, macroscopic order comes from greater microscopic order. If there's any order on the large scale, which we see, that means that there is some order and symmetry and beauty at the small scale. Right? Modern physics hasn't taken away order and symmetry. It's actually revealed more order and symmetry. Here's another quote from Stephen Barr on this note, and again, same author. The fact is that the constants of nature are very specific. They're very fine-tuned. The law has to be a certain way it is in order for us to exist, and that can be regarded as a natural law as well. And I think he addresses that more in the next section, but it does play into what he's saying here. And the fact is, too, that there is an unexpected and miraculous ability for us to describe the universe in terms of mathematics. And this is reflected in Eugene Wigner's famous essay about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in the physical sciences. Here's a quote from that essay. And then Stephen Hawking reflects on even the fact that there's a universe that can be described by equations is an incredible thing. Also, genes are encoded information. We talk about laws, things that happen even on the biological level. There is encoded information there, and encoded information needs a coder. And this, again, comes out more in the next section on design, but it does play into what he's saying here. He also says that laws are not what they used to be, that as if the laws have somehow changed, but the fact is there are still laws. It's just that they've been updated and are no less regular than the old laws that we had. Also, the fact is that the laws still work, only for limited application. For a lot of science, they don't necessarily need the newer versions of general relativity and that sort of thing. They can use the old Newtonian systems and they work just fine. And I haven't stopped teaching that old physics to my students. It's not that that is incorrect. It's correct, but only up to a certain point. He accuses people also of confusing natural and human law. And but the fact is that the natural law that we're referring to refers also in part to the miraculous regularity and intelligibility that we see in the world. Another quote from Stephen Barr and another physicist, Kenneth Ford, said this. Psychologizing about the thoughts, how the thoughts came to people, borders on ad hominem. If he just says, oh, well, they're confusing natural law and natural law, that doesn't mean that there's not a natural law. Also, there's mathematical law. Our minds are able to grasp these mathematical laws, and those are laws not necessarily of physical nature, although they seem to work to describe physical nature, but there are laws about the laws of logic, the nature of logic, and tells us something interesting about our minds that we're able to grasp those in the first place. There's a famous person named Bertrand Russell who reflected on this. Here's his quote. And then also Eugene Wigner again. He also makes this dilemma at one point. He says, if God gave the laws for his own reasons, then the train of law breaks down. In other words, he says, well, then you don't have law anymore because God just made it the way he wanted to. And then the other side of the dilemma, if God had to give those laws, then God is subject to laws. And this looks a lot like the Euthyphro dilemma from Plato's famous dialogue, the Euthyphro, which he gets into in the moral section later. But the fact is that the first option is the whole argument, that the law had to have an origin, and God gave those laws for his own reasons. We're not looking to establish a train of law all the way back even into God. But what we're saying is that God himself is the source of the law. And again, order can only come from greater order, which means that if we see laws in nature, we see regularity, then that had to come from something where there's even greater order, God himself, who is described as, by serious thinkers, as ultimate simplicity and order and beauty and harmony. The effect cannot be greater than the cause. So if we see some effects in nature, that had to have a cause from God.